What is up, guys? It's your boy Chris. Today we're gonna be reacting to SCP Explain Termination Attempts to SCP-682, the hard to kill reptile. If you don't remember, 682 was a reptile that adapts into almost anything that you throws at it. And also, like, it's a doomsday. It's the doomsday of SCP universe. So, you know doomsday, right? Like in the DC and shit. Anyways, like the video, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell button for post notifications. If you have any suggestions, comment down below. Let's get into the intro.
Here we go again. It's time to return to the acid-filled containment chamber of SCP-682, more commonly known as the hard-to-destroy reptile. We've spoken about him and the ways the SCP Foundation has attempted to destroy him in a previous video. But as we said back then, we really only scratched the surface of the huge number of insane ways the Foundation has tried to wipe this cranky lizard off the face of the Earth. Today we're filling in some of the cracks and taking a look at the secret test logs detailing the Foundation's unsuccessful quest to finally destroy SCP-682. Some of these may surprise you, and if you're a real SCP expert, you may just recognize some familiar faces we meet along the way. Esteemed Foundation researcher Dr. Alto Clef, famed for his somewhat unconventional personality, entered the test chamber to see if he could intimidate the beast to death. This resulted in a long staring contest between Dr. Clef and 682. Towards the end of the competition, Dr. Clef began to lose his nerve. He tried to leave the room, only to find that the door was locked, causing him to swear loudly. Dr. Clef, who always tries to find the most direct solution to his problems, blew up the door with plastic explosives and ran off. The result? Test failed. Next came SCP-662, a silver handbell that summons the supernaturally helpful butler, Mr. Deeds. When Mr. Deeds was summoned, Foundation researchers asked him if he could kill SCP-682. Deeds politely explained that he wouldn't be capable of killing 682. It's just too strong. When he asked if he could at least incapacitate 682, he replied that the best way to do this would be to poison himself and allow 682 to eat his body. But this, he reminded, would only be a temporary problem for the lizard. Another test failed. The Foundation brought in SCP-689, a terrifying soapstone statue of a sitting skeleton that can kill you if you see it, and then stop paying attention to it. 682 first observed the statue, and then the Foundation turned off the lights. When they turned them back.
What? How do you contain that shit if you're not looking at it? Like that, bro. I'm so confused. So
back on. SCP-682 appeared to be dead in a puddle of gray and black liquid. D-Class personnel were sent in to confirm that 682 was actually dead, but it instead got up and killed them. Researchers theorized that 682's definition of life is not quite the same as ours, rendering 689's death-related powers ineffective. Test failed. SCP-807 was next up to bat. This is an anomalous salmon-colored ceramic dinner plate with the words "Last Chance Diner" printed on the edges in white. Any food placed on it becomes irresistible by any definition, but when the food is consumed, it causes immediate cardiac arrest due to the sudden clogging of arteries with fat. Researchers made a meal known as the 682 Special. 10 kilograms of rotten meat and sharpened bone splinters, 10 liters of rancid mayonnaise, 1 liter of potassium cyanide, and 1 kilogram of morphine hydrochloride, combined into a solid mass and transmuted by 807. When 682 consumed this disgusting meal, it appeared to collapse. However, when D-Class personnel were sent in again to see whether 682 was truly out for the count, multiple holes opened up in its body. These holes fired out high-pressure jets of blood, killing the nearby D-classes and destroying the containment cell. 682 was fine afterwards. Another test failed. To kill 682, it seemed that the Foundation really needed to have God on their side. So they tried to recruit
God.
SCP-343, also known as God, to help them destroy the beast. However, when he entered the containment chamber, he somehow couldn't even see the beast. When
What?
researchers asked him whether he could kill 682, God replied, "He's not one of mine. Deal with him yourself." Test failed before it even began.
Boss.
Next, the Foundation recruited
Boss.
SCP.
Alright, as far as I remember, SCP-682 was offspring of the Scarlet King. Makes sense, he's not one of his creation. But to just say like, it's not one of my own, so it's not my responsibility. You know, to say it like that, you got, bro, God, you're so irresponsible as hell. You know?
SCP-524, a small white rabbit that can
Yeah,
eat literally anything, including
Oh.
itself, without being harmed. The rabbit was released into
Wait, how does it
SCP-682's
work
chamber,
if it
at
eats
which
itself?
point it approached 682 and began to eat one of its legs. 682 roared in pain and scuttled up the wall, out of 524's reach, where it remained for a number of hours. At this point, SCP-524 seemed to become bored and began eating its way out of containment through a nearby wall. Test
Holy
failed.
shit.
Maybe the luck of the Irish was what the Foundation needed to finally put this monster to rest. They recruited SCP-1933, a fat man dressed as Santa Claus whose bodily fluids consist entirely of the alcoholic beverage known as Irish cream. If enough of this
Irish
man's
cream.
self-produced Irish cream is fed to something, they'll find that all of their bodily fluids have become Irish cream too, killing them. The Foundation fed large
What the
quantities
fuck?
of this
It's so
Irish cream
bizarre,
to
you know?
SCP-682, and it actually had an effect, causing 682 to appear intoxicated, which was a promising sign. However, it soon vomited out a massive
Bro.
quantity of SCP-1933 bodily fluids, turning the walls of its cell into Irish cream and allowing it to escape and wreak havoc. Test failed.
Fail.
Big time. The Foundation recruited the help of SCP-2337, an intelligent corncrake known as Dr. Spanko, with a voice so loud it can quite literally talk its victims to death if it speaks to them for an extended period of time. It was sent into SCP-682's chamber to attempt to destroy the beast, but 682 just told it to leave, and the talkative bird obliged by blowing
What?
away one of the chamber walls with a yell, allowing
Yo.
SCP-682 to breach containment again. Terrible job, Dr. Spanko.
Okay, so far
Test
it's worthy of his
failed.
name.
The Foundation
Hard-kill
researchers were
reptile,
starting
you
to
know?
get a little frustrated with their lack of progress, which you can no doubt sympathize with, and they even pitched the possibility of sending SCP-682 into an alternate dimension, where perhaps it would enter into a stalemate
Hey,
against
that's
its
not a bad
alternate
idea,
self.
though.
But this pitch was shot down by the O5 Council on the grounds that it was way too risky. Back
What do
to
you
the drawing
mean?
board, by which we mean they literally
what do you mean
transformed
too
682's
risky, though,
skin
like?
into a kind of drawing board. SCP-2521 is an anomaly that manifests anytime information about it is recorded, and immediately grabs the source of the information, wrapping it in its tendrils and taking it away
Holy shit.
with it. The Foundation sought to take advantage of this by using a laser cutter to cut this anomalous information into SCP-682's side. However, this didn't have the results they were hoping for. SCP-2521 did turn up to take the information, but it only took the skin on which the information was carved. 682 survived and quickly grew back its skin.
What?
Test failed. Again. Researchers suggested tracking down SCP-169, an obscenely massive underwater creature known as the Leviathan, and feeding 682
Oh yeah, that
to the
giant
beast.
eel thing.
However, this idea was
inside,
also immediately shot
on the
down by
ocean.
the O5 Council. If 682 did what it did best, which was surviving attacks and adding them to its own arsenal, then it might grow to the size of SCP-169,
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
which would likely trigger an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. It
Launch it
simply
into space,
was
you
not
know?
worth the
Come on.
risk. Test failed before it even started. The Foundation released 2 specimens of SCP-939 into 682's test chamber. These voice-imitating, amnesia-inducing monsters have caused huge damage to human targets, so it was hoped that they may be able to do something to 682. But this hope turned out to be misplaced. Both specimens seemed extremely distressed by 682's presence,
What
and
do you mean?
refused to engage at all. 682 did not share the same apprehension about attacking. It charged in and brutally killed both before devouring their
God
corpses.
damn, bro.
Test failed. In a very well-documented case, the adorable SCP-999 was introduced
brother.
into 682's test chamber.
999 is
The
brother,
unassailable
though.
good vibes provided by 999, as well as an intense tickle fight, did actually lead to the temporary incapacitation of SCP-682. However, the otherwise wholesome incident ended in tragedy, when 682 adapted to the good vibes and was able to release a kind of violent laughter wave. This incapacitated much of the staff, and allowed 682 to breach containment and go on another killing
Pause. It adapted again, bro. It adapted again. How ridiculous is this one?
spree before being recontained. Test,
Fucking hell,
once
bro.
again, failed. The next test involved SCP-294, an anomalous coffee
crazy,
machine
man.
that can produce
Its
any liquid
adaptation
typed
ability
into
is
its
ridiculous.
keypad. Foundation researchers requested SCP-682 Killer from the machine and were astounded by the results. During tests on the liquid with SCP-682 tissue samples, the liquid was surprisingly effective and caused the 682 tissue to decay and crumble. Tests on the living creature were similarly promising. The acid in 682's tank was temporarily lowered, and 1 liter of SCP-682 Killer was poured onto the reptile's head, causing that portion of its flesh to immediately decay. When the acid was returned, the same portion that had the liquid poured on it dissolved instantly. Test, well, not quite successful, but promising, and requiring further research. Foundation scientists
There
believe
you
that if
go.
they could
You
one
got- you
day get a
gotta-
large enough
you
quantity
gotta
of this
lead on it.
liquid, they might have a viable option. But
Yeah.
until then, the tests march on. For another experiment, they introduced SCP-055 into the containment chamber of SCP-682. SCP-055, also known as the Self-Keeping Secret, is a mysterious anomaly that can
What is
only be
that?
described by what it isn't. For example, we know that SCP-055 is not round, but that was pretty much it. Now, however, we know something else about SCP-055, that it can't kill SCP-682.
What the hell is
Test
that,
failed, but at least we know twice as much about
I don't know about that
SCP-055 as we
SCP.
did before. Next came SCP-082, better known as Fernand the Cannibal. Fernand was first presented a piece of flesh from 682, but rather than eating it, he inspected it and began to express joy that his friend still lived. When introduced into
What?
682's testing chamber, Ferdinand attempted to subdue the lizard and use it as his steed. 682 expressed
What
an
the
intense
fuck?
hatred for both Ferdinand and the
Yo.
idea of being ridden like a pony, and the two of them
guy's
engaged in
savage.
combat. Mobile task forces were eventually brought in to subdue both subjects. In a debrief interview, both hinted that they shared history prior to containment, but 682 was reluctant to talk about it further. Test entertaining, but still a failure. Researchers were becoming extremely frustrated with SCP-682's unwillingness to die, so they called in an SCP who responded to reason much better. SCP-049, the Plague Doctor.
Yeah, the Plague
This
Doctor.
sinister surgeon can kill with a touch, and the Foundation hoped that his abilities would extend to 682.
Come
However,
on,
the
cure
result
his
was a dud.
flag, you know?
The Plague Doctor
Cure him.
did touch 682, but it experienced no adverse effects and eventually swiped at the Doctor. Upon leaving, 049 reported feeling emotionally disturbed by his encounter with SCP-682. Yep,
What do you mean?
guessed it. Test failed. If it gives you any
Bro,
indication of just how
this thing
desperate the
is
researchers were at this
ridiculous.
point, Dr. Graham pondered whether introducing 682 to a human with just as pessimistic and misanthropic feelings as itself would somehow pacify it. They sent in a particularly nasty D-class, and the two spoke. Fascinatingly, 682 didn't attempt to harm this D-class. They just shared their profane and bleak sentiments about the human race with one another. However, some of 682's opinions were a little too spicy for this D-class.
What do you
After
mean
listening
it's
to the
too
reptile
spicy?
speak for 20 minutes, the D-class fell into a catatonic state from the sheer depression of it all. He died not long
It
after.
backfired,
One
bro.
researcher suggested
The fuck?
perhaps the worst idea of all, letting SCP-682 out into the wild. Not even really to terminate it, just to see what it does. The scientists figured there would be
Gotta kill
some
anything,
merit
you know,
in analyzing the
living thing,
creature's
that's its
behavior.
job.
This idea was submitted anonymously,
Kill
of
everything.
course. It seems even the most sadistic of researchers know better than to put their name on an idea like that. As you can probably guess, this request was shot down by the O5 Council. The
Yeah.
note attached to the request by one of its members summed it up best. I'll tell you what it will do. It'll go out for a nice stroll, murder a few innocent people, go fishing, slaughter a few more innocent people, start up a tech company, eat a few more innocent people, go on a vacation to Florida, dismember a few more innocent people. I swear, when I find out who wrote this, you can personally enter 682's containment chamber to
Yo.
analyze him yourself. This has been far from an
They
exhaustive
pissed
account
off
of
the
all the
O5,
different
bro.
ways the SCP Foundation has tried to terminate
Fucking hell.
SCP-682. But it shouldn't be surprising that all of their ideas have either been failures or were too risky to even try. Sadly for the SCP Foundation and the human race, it's likely we'll be dealing with SCP-682 for a long time to come. But do you have an idea for how you think 682 could finally be killed? Something that even the
Yep,
Foundation hasn't
I've
thought
got
of to
another
try?
idea.
Let us know in the comments. And then go check out SCP-682,
Shit.
ways the Foundation
Yo guys, that is SCP Explain. Attempt to terminate SCP-682. Y'all know it, I've got an idea though. Why don't we send it into space? You know, send it to Jupiter, the SCP-2399. You know, that malfunctioning destroyer. It's like an alien aircraft that is stranded in Jupiter, you know. Send it there. It'll take care of themselves, you know, it'll take care of it. Or send it into the Russia. You know, the last video that I watched, the SCP candidates of SCP-001, you know that void where nothing exists in that part of the place in Russia? Send it there, it'll disintegrate, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of ways to kill this thing, unless it can adapt to that, you know. We'll never know unless you try. But hey, like the video guys, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell button for post notifications, comment down below for algorithms and shit. Also you can comment down and suggest which video should I react. With that being said, I'll see you guys soon.